Nano Machine. Bai, Ang Hongweolya. Chapter 337. Imperial Order. Part 1. Mountain of 10,000 consisted of hundreds of mountain peaks. There was one man who was shooting through the woods at an enormous speed. It even looked like a hint of wind that just shot through with untrained eyes. The man who was showing this amazing skill of stepping skill was the lord of demonic cult, Chun Yowan. Each step that Yowan took changed the area. After he reached the end stage of the Supreme Master level, his stepping skill exceeded that of great guardian Marakim, who had the nickname of Wind God, as Yowan became faster and more powerful. It had been about 2 days since Yowan ran like this without rest. I have to hurry. Yowan was concerned that he might not make it in time. According to the urgent message sent to him 2 days ago, the unexpected guest was expected to arrive at the demonic cult's castle within 2 days. Yowan was at a location that would take at least 3 days due to the carriage, so Yowan had to travel alone. My lord. We'll follow along. 2 elders volunteered to follow, but Yowan told them to stay behind and take Gamrosu with them. Yowan had to slow down if 2 elders followed him, so he had to travel alone. Officially, Yowan was known to be in closed-room training, but these guests were those that required Yowan to come out of said closed-room training to greet them. Faster. Yowan increased his speed. After traveling through the mountains, when Yowan was about 10 miles away from the castle, he heard the sound of horse hooves and mild trembling on the ground. He opened his senses and sensed many figures. Yowan then looked in the direction where soldiers were making a long parade as they moved along. Oh? Yowan stopped for a second and stood on a high tree, looking at them. There was a lavish golden carriage in the middle, and the flag that was held high in the front had the seal of the Imperial Palace. So, it is from the Imperial Palace. Many soldiers were guarding the area. It was a parade of over 3,000 people. But Yowan became curious. I heard the government does not meddle with Yulin. But those soldiers learned martial arts. There were about 300 soldiers with orange armor guarding the golden carriage. They ranged from top to master-level warriors. And him? There was one man on a horse in the lead, also with orange armor who had learned martial arts. His level was vastly different from that of his men, as this man was at the superior master level. A general at the superior master level? It was curious as to how a rare-leveled warrior would be within the Imperial army. There was a handsome-looking young man with a golden sash standing by him, looking like his lieutenant. He was a bit weaker than the man, but he was at the super master level. These two were very different from the others. Nano, zoom in. Zooming in on the target. Yowan's eye zoomed in on those 2 men. He then found the man to be very dignified and strongly featured. It seemed he must be a general with a very high-ranking title. This is strange. But Yowan was more concerned about the lieutenant. He had unique feelings that felt like he wasn't from an army, but the son of a wealthy family. And who is the man in that carriage that is guarded by such group? Yowan felt one person's presence within the carriage, but the man had no martial art power. Well, I will know soon enough. After looking at them, Yowan took steps again to go further south so he can get to the castle faster and prepare to greet these guests. At the same time, toward the northern gate of the castle, cultists were busy preparing to greet the guest coming from the Imperial Palace. A road was covered with silk and the other preparations were being made. On the wall, a man with red silk clothes with butterfly embroidery looked toward the north, as if he was waiting for someone. Is he not here yet? It was 7th Elder Huan Yi. He had white makeup on to make him look feminine. He was looking toward north with a concerned look. Someone then climbed up from below. It was Great Guardian Marakim with his unique engraved mask. Is Lord not here yet? Marakim asked and Huan Yi shook his head. No. The Imperial army will soon arrive, this is bad. Huan Yi already heard that the guest was already within 10 miles. They had to be prepared to greet the incoming guest. If the Lord did not arrive within that time frame, everyone starting from the Imperial Palace to all cultists would know immediately that the Lord had been absent. That is concerning. Marakim also nodded in concern and looked toward the north. That's when he found something in his sight. Something like a dot was coming in their direction at enormous speed. It's really fast. It was so fast that a mere glance would have made Marakim think it was leaves flying through the breeze. Huan Yi didn't seem to have realized it yet, and Marakim might have missed it if he didn't look carefully. The dot was becoming bigger as it only kicked off the top of a tree to jump across. Wait. They weren't sure who it was, but Marakim couldn't sense anything. This meant the dot was a man who was stronger than him. If this man was stronger than Marakim, a supreme master-level warrior, it could only mean one of the top 5 warriors of Yulin. And the dot was moving from left to right, trying to hide himself from being caught. Is he doing that to hide? That would surely hide the man from the eyes of just normal warriors. But there was a large open area between the end of forest and to the castle wall, and that would surely reveal the man. Elder Juan. We must be ready to defend. Defend? What do you mean? Look. Marakim pointed at the dot. The dot was now close enough to show that it was a human figure. See what? Don't you see that trace? Juani concentrated and finally saw something. It was so fast that he had to focus really hard to even catch a glimpse of its movement. What is that? Chapter 338. Imperial Order. Part 2. We must activate the defense formation at once. Why at this moment? That level surely meant a powerful enemy. Just a bit closer and the face would be revealed. And when Juani was about to order the guards to set the alarm for the intruder, Marakim saw the face. Elder Juan. Stop. Juani stopped and turned back with a curious look. Marakim then sent a telepathic message. It's our lord. What? Are you sure? The one who was coming at an enormous speed was Yoan. It was very close to making things complicated, but they were able to stop. The reason why Yoan was creating that trace seemed to be because Yoan did not want to let others know that he had been out of the castle walls. It should be better if he comes from the other gates. Juani became concerned. There was a large open area in front of the gate, so that would surely reveal Yoan. But something unexpected happened. Toward the end of the forest, Yoan jumped high up into the last tree before the open area. And my lord. What is he doing? Marakim and Juani became shocked as Yoan jumped even higher than the castle wall. Warriors above the wall were too busy as they were preparing to greet the guest and didn't notice Yoan in the air. Yoan took steps in the air, flying across the wall. Marakim and Juani became so shocked that they almost screamed. By the gods! Airwalking? This was the airwalking technique, where a man used energy to step on air to fly through. This technique was deemed a legendary stage of the stepping skill that equaled its legendary state to that of air sword flying, which all people of Yulin only dreamt of. The Lord has gone up to an even higher stage. This wasn't something even Marakim could do. He could barely turn the direction of a fall in the air, but Yoan was easily doing something so incredible. However, what Yoan did next when he was up in the air was even more amazing. Wait. Yoan pulled out the white dragon blade, threw it up, and got up on it to fly through the air. Yoan flying through it twice the height of the castle wall made him unspotted as he flew across it. Two of them became dumbfounded. Soon, Yoan shot through the wall and went into the inner palace. Juani sent a telepathic message with a dumbfounded look. Great Guardian. What do you think happened outside? I want to ask you myself. Chun Yoan had returned as a monster in just a month's time. He had power that equaled that of the top 5 warriors of Yulin. Marakim and Juani quickly followed Yoan to the inner palace. It seemed Yoan knew they were following him as he was waiting for them near the palace. Greetings, my lord. Great Guardian at your service. Greetings, my lord. 7th Elder at your service. Was everything alright while I was gone? Of course, my lord. I'm sorry to say this, but we have to make haste. They quickly escorted Yoan so that he could get changed into formal attire to greet the guest. All other elders remaining within the palace were already dressed as they all had to greet the incoming guest. When Yoan entered the palace, everyone got up from their seats and bowed. Glory to the demonic cult. And with that, 3rd Elder Munyun, the highest-ranking elder at the moment, greeted him. Yoan became awkward as he looked at Munyun. Yoan had slept with his granddaughter Munku while he was out in Yulin. They weren't married yet, so Yoan felt apologetic toward Munku's grandfather Munyun. After the guest from Imperial Palace is settled, I should talk with Elder Mun. Whatever the case, they had to deal with the guest first. Yoan took the 6 elders and 3 of the remaining 6 swords to the northern gate where preparations complete. All clan leaders were out in line. They all stood ready to greet the guest. Hundreds of horses stomping on the ground caused mild trembling. Soon, the Imperial army revealed themselves through the woods. As they got closer, soldiers divided into 2 rows, opening a row in the middle so that the lavish golden carriage could move up front. A man in orange armor who was in the front got down from his horse and went up to them. Marakim and the other elders became surprised. They all sensed, just like Yoan, that the man was at the superior master level. The man looked at Yoan and cultists with an arrogant look and shouted, "Citizens of the Great Ming. I am Southern Commander Yan Namgun." All cultists became shocked. Juani then sent a telepathic message to Yoan who did not know much about the Imperial Palace's ranks and titles. And my lord. That man is from the Imperial Guards. The Imperial Guards were a military group entrusted by the Emperor himself. They had the leader, supreme commander, and two commanders, the northern and southern commander. These commanders were high-ranking officials of the Imperial Palace. Yoan did not know, but both of the commanders' power was famous even within Yulin. Who is in that carriage that made such a high-ranking general come down here? The carriage began to move. It seemed the person inside was getting out. That man is from the Imperial, huh? With the door of the carriage being opened, the person finally revealed himself. The man was plump with narrow eyes, with a goat-like beard. He did not look like anything that Yoan had imagined as a person from the royal family. Humph. The man then carefully took out something from the carriage over to the small plate, and got down from the carriage. What is that? On the plate, there was a red silk scroll with golden dragon embroidery. Everyone looked at it weirdly, and Yan Namgun became furious and shouted, "How dare you stand straight in front of the Emperor's order? Get down to your knees right now." The purpose of the lavish golden carriage was to bring down the scroll that contained the order of the Emperor. Chapter 339. Imperial Order. Part 3. 3 days before the Imperial forces arrived at the demonic cult castle, someone called out to the person outside the golden carriage. "Southern Commander. Are you there?" "Yes, Your Highness." Yan Namgun, who was the lead of the Imperial Guards who guarded the carriage, slowed down his horse to walk next to the carriage. The person then ranted from within the carriage. "Commander. Isn't it weird for me, King of the Great Ming Dynasty, to go down myself to send the message?" The man who inside of the golden carriage along with the Imperial Order was the second son of the Emperor of the Great Ming, Zhu Taikon. Zhu Taikon was very displeased with the fact that he had to go down to the mountain of 10,000 himself. He did follow the direct order from the Emperor, but he still wasn't happy about it. "It's an order from the Emperor himself. Please, consider it." Yan Namgun spoke to Zhu Taikon. Yan Namgun had been saying this multiple times throughout their trip already, but Zhu Taikon's discomfort did not disappear. "I don't understand why our first emperor even promised such a thing." Zhu Taikon didn't say this out loud, as speaking ill of the first emperor of the Great Ming was not allowed even for the son of the current emperor, especially because of the non-aggression pact between the entire Yulin and the empire. This was a pact made between the first emperor of Great Ming and 3 leaders of the 3 factions of Yulin. Martial artists of Yulin who had unimaginable power as a single entity was a serious threat to the empire. There were some dynasties in the past that fought a war against Yulin, but the first emperor of Great Ming considered a waste to fight within and made a pact with them instead. I heard the martial artists helped when the Great Ming first started. They were told that from the beginning. But now that was 180 years ago. "Commander." "Yes, Your Highness." "Who owns this land?" "It belongs to the Emperor of the Great Ming, Your Highness." "Then who are those who live in the land of Great Ming?" "They are the citizens of the Great Ming, Your Highness." The carriage shook as the man inside punched his fist into the carriage. "Then why are these so-called martial artist thugs disrespecting our empire?" "What are you?" "They are citizens of the empire who should come bow in fear when the emperor orders them to. But why am I, a king, going down to them instead?" Zhu Taikon was furious at the fact that he had to take orders from the emperor and go down to send these people messages by himself. And he didn't like this demonic cult faction, where they considered their lord to be the sky. Even the Emperor of Great Ming himself only considered him to be the son of the sky. It was very arrogant of them. Why are they so different from those who call themselves the forces of justice? Those from the forces of justice considered themselves as citizens of the Great Ming and always paid respect toward the empire. Zhu Taikon saw many powerful warriors from the forces of justice within the imperial palace when they were invited. Some of them even offered to teach warriors of the royal family in Way of the Blades. Zhu Taikon, who was highly interested in martial arts, also took this chance to learn blade art from a monk from the Fire Mountain clan. As far as I know, Your Highness, the cult, and the forces of evil have different values. Commander Yan Namgun had few friends from the forces of justice and had heard about the power struggle between the 3 factions. These 3 factions were older than the Great Ming itself, and always struggled to keep their values. Values? Rubbish. That's up to them, not us. Are only the forces of justice considered citizens of the Great Ming Empire? No, Your Highness. Yan Namgun had no objection to that. Even if all these martial artists were fighting against each other, they all were citizens of the Great Empire. Emperor ordered it himself, but that's not good. It's better if I can make the Lord come up to the palace himself. If I can do that, it will be a great feat. Unlike the Yulin clan of the Forces of Justice, no leader from the demonic cult or alliance of forces of evil came to the Imperial Palace. They always sent their messenger to keep the pact in place, arrogantly. If it wasn't for Zhu Taiyun who chose to go down to the Yulin clan, Zhu Taikon would have chosen to go to the Yulin clan instead. But with the eldest son, Zhu Taiyun, choosing first, Zhu Taikon had to choose the demonic cult as they were known to treat guests from the Imperial Palace with respect at least. As for the alliance of the forces of evil, even his uncle suggested not to go. I can't let this go on like this. What do you think, Yucking? Zhu Taikon asked, and a man who was on a horse left of the carriage answered under the shadows, Your Highness. I heard the Lord has been replaced recently. I heard that too. Before Zhu Taikon departed for the demonic cult, he asked monks from the Fire Mountain clan who were at the palace to teach blade arts to the demonic cult. They didn't know the details, but they said the new lord was very young. From what I have heard, the previous lord had a health problem, and that the new lord overthrew him and took his place. Oh? Is that so? Zhu Taikon became interested in the news that he hadn't heard of. The man continued, Your Highness. It is said the new lord replaced most of the powerful individuals of the cult, and the lord himself is very foolish. How about you take this chance as your advantage? Advantage? If you teach this ruffian the way of our empire, this will earn you trust from the emperor. Yan Namgun frowned at the man named Yucking. The way the imperial order was delivered was entirely in the hands of Zhu Taikon, but he wasn't sure if this approach and thinking might be beneficial. Interesting. Go on. But Zhu Taikon seemed to be very interested. After hearing the plan, Zhu Taikon, unfortunately, decided to do what Yucking told him to do. That Yucking? I am worried how the cult will react to this. Yan Namgun became concerned, but he was an imperial guard. He could only take orders from the royal family. Chapter 340. Imperial Order. Part 4. Yan Namgun shouted at the cultists standing in front of the castle gate. Get down to your knees and take the Imperial Order. The loud, dignified shouts wielded energy. Most people would hastily get down on their knees in front of the Imperial Order, but this time it was different. The air turned cold, and while these people seemed to be welcoming up until now, they suddenly turned very cold and grim. Yan Namgun became wordless at the unexpected reaction. He did guess that cultists would not bow easily, but he didn't imagine the reaction would be this cold. They are not like ordinary martial artists. But this is going too far. The order seemed a bit much, but when facing cultists not willing to bow, Yan Namgun became furious as he was a commander of the Imperial Guard who protected the Imperial Palace's authority. He then frowned and tried to shout when he heard the telepathic message. Enough. You won't be enough. It was sent from Zhu Taikon. The chubby man then frowned and called out to one of the Imperial guards to hold the plate that carried the Imperial Order scroll. He then walked a few steps up and shouted toward the cultists. I am King Zhu Taikon, under the order of the Emperor of the Great Ming Empire. The chubby man was Zhu Taikon. The cultists became shocked. King? Is he the son of the Emperor? Those who were given the title of a king were only the male relatives of the Empire. They expected the one inside the carriage to be a high-ranking official, but they didn't expect to see a king. Yuan then heard Huan Yi's telepathic message. My lord. He must be the second son of the current emperor. Huan Yi was the leader of covert operations and intelligence that he knew the names of all the royal families. There was a visit from the imperial palace due to the non-aggression in the past, so they had to be aware. But the atmosphere was different. The way Zhu Taikon was talking to them was as if he was talking to normal citizens. How dare you still stand in front of the Imperial Order and the King of the Empire? Zhu Taikon seemed as if he wanted to see cultists getting down on their knees. The cultists became hesitant. They seemed to be worried if their lord would become uncomfortable for this turn of events. It must be him. Zhu Taikon found Chen Yuan with a lavish black robe standing between the cultists. Everyone seemed to be concerned about him, so it was certain that he was the new lord of the demonic cult. I can't feel anything from him, but he must be it. Chen Yuan had collected his energy, so it wasn't possible to feel any energy coming out from him. He felt more like an ordinary man rather than a martial artist. That's why all the Imperial Guards and Zhu Taikon didn't even think Yuan was the lord of the demonic cult. He really is nothing. Zhu Taikon figured the lord of the cult might still be a powerful warrior, but he wasn't. Zhu Taikon then pointed at Yuan with his finger. Are you the lord of the demonic cult? Left Guardian Li Hamming turned cold at the sudden arrogant words being thrown at Yuan. All other cultists reacted similarly. But Zhu Taikon did not care and flicked his finger at Yuan. Now I see why all your cultists are so arrogant and foolish. Come down here on your knees and take the order from the emperor. His last word enraged all the cultists. How dare he? He is insulting our lord. With each of the cultists unleashing their internal energy, a powerful aura spooked all horses, making them neigh and try to turn. Ugh. Horses. Whoa. But all those from the Imperial army were able to feel this power being unleashed from the cultist. The southern commander who felt this before the others pulled out his sword and shouted, "You dare show your hostility toward the king who bears the order of the emperor? Is the demonic cult trying to commit treason?" Acts of treason against the emperor and his relatives were not allowed under the law of the empire. But when these words were spoken, all cultists became dumbfounded. Ha ha ha. You have no choice. Zhu Taikon became satisfied. It was likely that the cultists became arrogant because the imperial palace had been treating them with respect until now. But the cultists were still citizens of the Great Ming Empire and there was no way for them to stand against the empire itself. If you are citizens of the Great Ming Empire, then you must act like it. It was evident that these cultists had to kneel before them. Will they keep their pride and side against the empire and face the might and army of 1,000,000 strong? Or will they throw away their arrogance and bow? Zhu Taikon assumed it would be the latter. But an old man with white hair came out from behind Yuan and knelt on his one knee to Yuan, "My lord. Will it be okay if I speak?" Yuan raised his hand to allow him. It was third elder, Munyun. Munyun got out and bowed his head down slightly toward Zhu Taikon. The imperial guard stood next to Zhu Taikon shouted angrily, "You dare not kneel before his hine." Ugh. But the guard became terrified by the sudden pressure of energy coming down on him. Munyun's energy made it painful for him. Munyun ignored it and said, "It is an honor to meet the king of the Great Ming Empire." Zhu Taikon spoke uncomfortably. "You dare look straight into my eyes and," but Munyun cut him off as he glared. "Sorry to interrupt, your highness. But we cultists of the great demonic cult only kneel to our sky and the Lord and no one else." Every cultist nodded eagerly at Munyun's strong words. All of those from the imperial palace became furious. This was treatment that they had never experienced before. "And we the demonic cult are under the non-aggression pact with the Great Ming Empire. We are independent of the empire and are not related to the empire in any sense." Zhu Taikon frowned. He didn't think Munyun would mention the non-aggression pact at this moment. The first emperor of the Great Ming asked for help from our cult, and made a non-aggression pact afterwards. Why do you come now and want us to kneel before you? Chapter 341. Imperial Order. Part 5. Munyun pointed out the fact. He was from a family that had a long history in the demonic cult, so he knew many historical pacts made in the past. As he said, Yulin and the Imperial Palace were entirely independent of each other. There were some from the Yulin clan of the Forces of Justice that joined the Imperial Palace, but the demonic cult had no interest in that. The cult only served the fire, demon god, and the lord who was a conduit to both of those. I knew this was coming. Yan Namgun sighed as soon as he heard it. There was no way the demonic cult will kneel to the king due to the non-aggression pact, nor will they succumb to threats. It's better to stop here and then make them become more uncomfortable. Carrying out any more of those plans that Yucking asked to do was only going to make cultists more furious. Yan Namgun thought Zhu Taikon would stop here since things weren't going as planned. But his expectation was wrong. You dare try to teach the king of the Great Ming? Guards, bring this arrogant man down on his knees. Zhu Taikon ordered, and even the handsome lieutenant who stood next to Yan Namgun frowned. Why? As you wish, your highness. 3 of the imperial guards immediately pulled out their swords and charged at Munyun. You are going too far. But there was no way Munyun would lose to top-class level warriors. Munyun easily shattered their swords with a flick of his hand. And my sword. Arg. That's when a few clan leaders came in and struck the guards down. Protect the king. Treason. The imperial guards immediately pulled out their weapons and used their steel shields to create a barrier. Yan Namgun became shocked by the situation going south, but Zhu Taikon smiled as if he wanted this to happen all along. He, they are making things worse for themselves. That's when he heard a telepathic message. Yucking. What do you think you are doing? Surprisingly, the chubby man who introduced himself as the king was actually Yucking. Yucking looked at the man who sent a telepathic message and responded politely. Your Highness. I am taking your order to teach these arrogant cultists a lesson. I never told you to do it this way. The man who was sending the telepathic message frantically was the lieutenant who stood next to Yan Namgun. He was the true King Zhu Taikon. He said we just need to show the authority of the palace. Yucking. He disguised himself as a guard and had Yucking be his decoy, but Yucking said something Zhu Taikon didn't wish to speak about and made things worse. Yan Namgun was now looking at him, thinking that Zhu Taikon actually ordered Yucking to do such a thing. It's not me. Zhu Taikon shook his head, but it was too late. The Imperial guards were frantically moving to be ready to fight. Yucking was satisfied with the situation. With this, the cult will now side against the Empire. We didn't even need to go down to the third option in the grand plan, everything has been done by Yucking's hand. It was then when a shadow drew upon Yucking. It was Chun Yowan who suddenly appeared in front of him. How did he come through the guards? There was no time to be surprised. Yucking, who was an established master, immediately attacked Yowan. But, Arg. His hand was cut down immediately from the wrist. Yucking screamed and shouted angrily. How dare you attack the king? This is treason. King? Don't give me that rubbish. What are you? Yowan then gathered blade chi on his hand and cut down his other arm from his shoulder. Arg. Yucking rolled on the ground from the pain of losing both his right hand and his left arm. Blood poured out from the wound, soaking the ground with blood. Yowan then reached down and picked Yucking's chubby body up with his hand. Guards became shocked to see such strength. What are you trying to? I'm trying to do this. Arg. Yowan then threw Yucking toward the gate where the cultists were gathered. Ugh. Yucking was instantly transferred from behind the Imperial guards to the middle of warriors of the demonic cult. How dare you? Get him. The Imperial guards charged toward Yowan with their swords, but Yowan disappeared, leaving his trace behind. The Imperial guards learned martial arts, so they knew what this was. He disappeared. Its mirror image. They tried to find Yowan, but Yowan was already in front of Zhu Taikon and Southern Commander Yan Namgun, who were surrounded by the Imperial guards. Yowan was so fast that no one was able to see him clearly. How did he get through the barrier? Get him. Guards tried to charge at Yowan, but three figures appeared around Yowan and blocked them. It was Great Guardian Marikim, Left Guardian Li Hamming, and Right Guardian Submang. Three guardians at the level beyond their imagination easily broke through the Imperial Guards' defenses. Li Hamming drew a line on the ground with his distinct red sword and warned, if you cross this line, it will cost at least an arm. Yeah. Same here. Submang also created a line on the ground with the blade chi from his crazy blade. Two superior master levels made all the Imperial guards stay in their spots in fear. And now, powerful clan leaders were circling around them. Is this the Yulin? No, the demonic cult? Zhu Taikon was shocked. He too had learned martial arts, a barrier created by top-class warriors would be impenetrable. But it was useless against them. And Chun Yowan, who didn't even seem to have learned martial arts, was a monster beyond imagination. When the area became silent, Yowan bowed slightly toward Zhu Taikon and spoke. Your Highness. That lieutenant armor fits you well. Chapter 342. Imperial Order. Part 6. King Zhu Taikon was dumbfounded. He had made a decoy and hid between guards, but this demon-like lord knew that he was the king after all. Then did he play along even when he knew that Taikon was hiding between the guards? Taikon became speechless when Yan Namgun walked forward to protect Taikon with a tense look. I know there is the pact of non-aggression, but do you think it can be justified to injure an official of the Imperial Palace and threaten His Highness? He seemed much more careful with his tone now. But it didn't make him any more comfortable with these cultists. Submang then scoffed as he said, Mr. Commander. It's not us, but you people who started this. But, as Submang said, it was the decoy to the king who started all this in the beginning. The demonic cult had its highest officials come out of the castle walls to greet them, paying the utmost respect to the Imperial Palace. But it was the palace who urged the cultists to kneel. He is correct, but I can't just say yes to their power or else the authority of our Imperial Palace will fall. The commander glanced toward the soldiers and the Imperial guards. They seemed all tense and fearful of the demonic cult warriors. This is not right. Even if they were at the demonic cult, they were still the Imperial army. The authority of the king, a son of the great Ming Empire's emperor, was not to be undermined. Yan Namgun had to stop that from happening at least. That was Yucking's doing, not our king. And even if what Yucking did made you feel uncomfortable, it doesn't mean you have the right to harm our official like that. Yan Namgun said. Yowan scoffed. He then asked Zhu Taikon, who was behind Yan Namgun, let me ask you, Your Highness. Our cult executes those who impersonate the Lord. How does the Imperial Palace take care of an impostor trying to be a king? Zhu Taikon frowned, but he couldn't say anything. Yoan easily countered the words that Yan Namgun had said to him. If it wasn't for the cult, the Imperial Palace would have also punished them heavily by killing the impersonator and their family. Let me tell you this, if it wasn't for the pact of non-aggression, that man would not be alive now. Chun Yoan, who became the Lord, never knelt to anyone, even if it was in the presence of the Emperor of the Great Ming Empire. This man isn't just only powerful. Yan Namgun was shocked by Yoan's monstrous power at first, but now that he saw it, Yoan was also very intelligent. Yan Namgun had to return to basic reasonings. Ugh, okay. Whatever the case, what you are doing is disrespecting the royal family. Get away from our king right now. And with that, Yan Namgun aimed his sword at Yoan. That's when someone charged toward him quickly and struck his sword. Yan Namgun focused 80% of his energy into it, but the attack had much more power in comparison. How can the power be that strong? He once thought that no one would stand a chance against him unless he was up against the top 5 strongest warriors of Yulin. He even dueled and tied against the elder of the Fire Mountain clan once. Who is this masked man? The man who attacked as soon as he aimed the sword was Great Guardian Marikim. With Yan Namgun's right arm thrown upward, he raised his left foot to kick up Marikim's neck. But Marikim easily dodged the attack by tilting his head back and struck his finger into the blood point on the leg. Arg! Yan Namgun screamed as sword chi penetrated through his thighs. He then tried to regain balance by pulling his leg back, but Marikim kicked his right leg that held him up. Yan Namgun was then thrown off to the ground. He dropped the sword he had been holding at the time, and Marikim reached out toward it. The sword then moved into Marikim's hand. Ugh! Marikim aimed his sword at Yan Namgun's neck and warned, "Don't you dare aim the sword at our lord." Ugh! Yan Namgun became wordless with the cold sword upon his neck. His pride that he earned after becoming a superior master warrior had shattered. The masked man was more of a warrior than he could ever be in terms of power. Commander is down. Yan Namgun was one of the top warriors within the Imperial Guards. With the only one who can protect to be fallen, Zhu Taikon became shocked. All other guards were too afraid of Yoan and his guardians. He will now threaten me too. The only thing Zhu Taikon now had was his mouth. He wasn't going to win against these cultists anyway. After a slight moment of thinking, Zhu Taikon spoke. How dare you threaten me and show violence toward the Imperial army? Are you not afraid of the million soldiers of the Great Ming Empire? Zhu Taikon chose the most simple way. For a prince who had grown up within the palace, it was not possible to imagine he had to bow down to someone who wasn't from the royal family. You are quite bold. Yoan spoke surprisingly. He thought this show of power was enough to make Zhu Taikon succumb. But Zhu Taikon didn't back off. He thought there was no way a martial artist, no matter how strong he was, would stand a chance against millions of arrows. Of course, a real battle against millions of warriors was not something that they could fight against. If you harm me in any way, the demonic cult will be wiped off the map. Zhu Taikon spoke strongly. He had to use the best weapon he had to threaten his enemies. He figured the demonic cult would not be afraid of the giant Imperial army coming at them. But it was strange. What's with that look? Chapter 343. Imperial Order. Part 7. Yoan, nor any of the cultists seemed to care. Yoan was even looking disappointed as he shook his head. You're not bold, but reckless. I was anticipating seeing someone from the government for the first time, but this is disappointing. What? Million armies? And with that, Yoan raised his left hand. That's when something happened to all Imperial guards surrounding them. What? What's happening? My sword. They had been clenching on their weapons, but suddenly their weapons began to come alive and move, trying to get out of their grasp. Arg. They tried to hold on to it by using their internal energy, but their energy was too feeble to resist to the great amount of force unleashed. Ugh. And over 200 weapons got out of their master's hand, turned in the air and aimed back at them. It was a sight to behold. Haik. Impossible. Commander Yan Namgun became terrified at the sight of this. He even thought maybe he was dreaming. Air sword? This is an air sword. Is the Lord really a monster or something? Yan Namgun was trained in martial art, so he knew what air sword is and who can use it. He heard that top 5 strongest warriors who were at Supreme Master level can use air sword. But this was beyond imagination. How can this be? But it wasn't only the Imperial army that were shocked. Marikim, who had guessed Yoan to have become Supreme Master level, and other high-ranking officials all became astonished. How did he become so strong in that short amount of time? All of them saw Yoan's power back at the Great Halls. But controlling over hundreds of swords at once made them have chills. Oh, our Chunma is here. Chunma has come down upon the world. Yoan's monstrous power even reminded them of Chunma, the sky demon. While the Imperial guards were being threatened by their own weapons, Yoan slowly walked toward Zhu Taikan. Hike! Zhu Taikan became terrified at Yoan's power and backed up a few steps before he tripped and fell down. There was no authority or dignity in his mind anymore. He was just terrified at the man standing in front of him. When Yoan gestured picking something up with his right hand, Zhu Taikan's body was pulled up in the air. Ugh! And my body? Zhu Taikan let loose of his body. He knew that resisting would give him internal damage against such powerful energy. When Taikan was pulled up, Yoan walked up to him and spoke. Do you know why the non-aggression pact was made? What do you mean? Do you think the pact was made because the demonic cult was afraid of the Imperial Palace's army of 1,000,000? Zhu Taikan couldn't answer, although he truly thought so. He just thought the reason for the pact's existence was because the Empire didn't want to waste valuable lives and also because they were helped. No, it's the opposite. Opposite? The pact is made because the first emperor was afraid of us. You dare? How can the first emperor of the Great Ming Empire be afraid of a... Ugh! Zhu Taikan tried to shout back angrily as Yoan seemed to insult the first emperor, but he couldn't finish as his body was sent higher up into the air. He was sent up too high, making him fear the height. An army only moves by the order of the emperor. But what if that emperor is gone? Zhu Taikan became shocked. This lord of the cult was saying that he could kill the emperor. Zhu Taikan wanted to object, but his body was rising up in the air, making him too scared to even speak. What if a warrior like me sneaks into the palace at night? Zhu Taikan became shocked. He then realized Yoan or the warriors of cult easily penetrated through the defense of the Imperial guards. When all members of the royal family are gone, whose order will the 1,000,000-strong army have to take? Zhu Taikan then felt the fear of death for the first time in his life. Yoan's cold eyes and words proved that he wasn't lying. He implied that he could do it anytime if he wanted to. He really means it. That was the most terrifying part. Do you now see why the pact was made in the first place? Yoan smiled as he pulled the terrifying energy back into him, and looked at Zhu Taikan shivering. Zhu Taikan nodded frantically at the question. His body was then slowly returned to the ground. Zhu Taikan slumped down on the ground. He was panting and was drenched in sweat from fear. Well, but that's not the only reason. If that was the sole reason, the Imperial Palace would have been gone since long ago. It was rumored that there was hidden power within the Imperial Palace that protected the Emperor. An assassination attempt would require power like Chen Yoan's, or else it wasn't possible. But he didn't need to speak about something that Zhu Taikan nor the Imperial guards knew about. The sword. With Yoan bringing his hand down, all air swords that were aimed at them dropped to the ground. Then shall we read what the Emperor is trying to say now? Yoan reached out toward the plate that dropped to the ground in front of the carriage, and the scroll automatically flew into Yoan's hand. The Imperial guards had seen so much that they weren't surprised by this anymore. Yoan untied the golden rope on it and was trying to open it when... Arg! He heard a scream and turned. In the distance, Yucking was bleeding from his eyes, nose, and mouth as he screamed in pain. All clan leaders around him seemed to be shocked by the unexpected behavior. What's going on? Yoan grabbed the scroll and ran toward Yucking. Chapter 344. Imperial Order. Part 8. The chubby man became painful as he glanced around at warriors of the demonic cult with a fearful look. Arg! It was the man Yucking who impersonated Zhu Taikan. The reason why he was thrown in the middle of cultists was to have this man tied up. Why you? I am an official of the Imperial Palace. Don't come near. Official? Ha! Arg! Yucking tried to move back with his feet, but he was surrounded by cultists. The atmosphere seemed rough. Damn it. I might die at this rate. He thought everything had been going well with his plan, but it wasn't. Stop for a moment. That's when one man walked out with a cold look. It was Mukyen from the Sword Illusion clan. I feel like ripping you apart, but I will let you live for now. Mukyen ripped his robe over him to tie it over his shoulder and arm to stop the bleeding, and sealed his blood points so that he cannot use internal energy. Yucking had to commit suicide at this point, but he was weak-minded, so he couldn't even try to do that. It was better to live as a slave than to die. But something unexpected happened. Yucking realized his body was turning cold. He then felt the excruciating pain of someone stabbing into his organs and screamed. Arg! Clan leaders quickly walked up to him and saw black blood oozing from all of his openings beside his ears. The blood let out a foul stench and smoke when it touched the ground. Poison. Get back. All clan leaders backed away when they realized Yucking was poisoned. Yucking then confirmed that he was indeed poisoned. Poison? Yucking? But how? Did the cult do it? Yan Namgun first thought if the cult was behind it, but that didn't seem possible. The Lord just showed that he could kill everyone if he wanted to. There was no need for poison. Ugh. Why? Since when? Before he was sent to King Zhu Taikon for the third part of the grand plan, he was planted with the centipede, but that was to activate only when he spilled important information. But he didn't know anything about the poison. Arg, the centipede kills by exploding. It wasn't the centipede. It was surely a different type of poison. Yucking felt the poison spreading into his body. That's when he thought of someone. Master of Blade Poison? He then remembered meeting with the Master of Blade Poison 2 days before he left for the Imperial Palace. This man was considered the most dangerous among the 6 masters. He was afraid, but the master provided him money and fed him good food that Yucking was pleased with. The food? It was that. Arg. Yucking vomited a large amount of blood and began to flinch. Now, the poison was coming all over his body. That's when Yoan quickly got up to him. My lord. It's dangerous. Poison is coming out of his body. Many clan leaders tried to stop him, but Yoan's hand was already reaching toward Yucking. The poison kept coming out from it, but with Yoan at the end stage of Supreme Master level, there was no way poison could affect Yoan anymore. The poison evaporated the moment it touched Yoan's skin. The poison won't work against him. So the Lord has reached the final stage. All clan leaders became astonished at the sight. But Yoan did not care and focused on his hand to check on Yucking's state. He felt the heart beating, but it was slowing down. Damn it. He couldn't let the man die. Yoan tapped on the telepathic message and found out that the man had disobeyed King Zhu Taikon and tried to have the Imperial Palace fight against the cult. Yoan then figured this man was a spy from another place. Yoan sent his energy into Yucking to push out the poison. Arg. But the poison had spread to all parts of the body, so it was too late. There was no chance Yucking would survive through the poison. What is wrong with him? Yoan asked with a confused look, and Mukyen answered. I sealed his blood points so that he can't use internal energy, and he was poisoned. Blood point seal? Yoan frowned. This meant the poison spread the moment the body was stopped using internal energy flow. This was surely done to prevent the man from spilling any information. Who can do such a thing? There was no way to make this man live anyway. Yoan then needed to search through him so he could find out where the man was from. Yoan then checked the body. This is Bichu art? Chapter 345. Imperial Order. Part 9. This was an art created from Sorum. The reason why Yucking was chubby was because he was trained in the art. It was famous and well known, but required one to gain weight and made the person slower, so it was unpopular. A spy from the forces of justice? That seemed likely considering the martial arts style. But why would they want the Imperial Palace to fight against the cult? This is strange. Wait. Yoan ordered Nano. Nano, do the MRI scanning. Understood. Initiating magnetic resonance imaging on the target. Yoan's hand shined with a faint red light, and Yoan had augmented reality over his eyes. The scanned image popped up. Let's start with the head. Yoan touched Yucking's head, as he could now barely move. That's when Yoan saw something on the image. Something small was squirming inside the head. Its movement was slowing down as if it was dying together with its host. It's the centipede. I'm sure of it. This was similar to the centipede that Yoan pulled out from Ebek, master of the Blade Sword of the Blade God's 6 martial clan. The only difference was that the centipede was dying. That's when Yucking's head fell. He finally had died. As soon as he died, the white thing in the image assumed to be the centipede exploded and turned into liquid. Fluid then oozed out of Yucking's eyes. It was the dead centipede. At the same time, in a dark stone room at the Yellow Mountain by the Jurkang Castle, noisy screaming filled the room as a red centipede screamed with a weird noise from within the red wooden box on the table. The man with his face hidden under the shadow was looking down at it. The centipede suddenly shivered and exploded. The man closed the wooden box and mumbled, "The cult again." The lid of the box read, "Third Grand Plan, Spy on the Demonic Cult." This time, the man didn't need to get the centipede as the spy was programmed so that he would die from poison the moment he was affected with any potential threat. There's no way you will find out what we are doing. The second grand plan failed recently. If it worked, the cult would have fallen under their hands, but they even lost the spies that waited for so long. At least he worked it so that the centipede would not leave a trace. There was no way the demonic cult would find out who was behind it. Or so they thought. There was one thing that the man did not know. It was Nano. Yoan was able to find out the centipede. Blade God 6 Martial Clan. The man was from the Blade God 6 Martial Clan. It's them again? Yoan couldn't imagine how influential this clan was now. That's when Yoan became curious about the Imperial Order and opened it. Ugh. Imperial Order. Get down on your knees. When the scroll opened, all Imperial guards and 2,000 soldiers went down on their knees and bowed. But Yoan and the cultists stood proudly. Ugh, those arrogant bastards. Commander Yan Namgun, who barely went down on his knees with an injured leg, gritted his teeth. But he couldn't say anything. Yoan read through the scroll. Unlike Zhu Taikon's arrogance, the scroll was written very politely, considering the cult as an equal. It was more of a letter rather than an order. I want to invite heroes and many important guests to the place of our renewed non-aggression pact for my successor. The scroll was an invitation being made to Yoan, dated next month. But the message didn't seem to be only aimed at the cult. Huh? Zhu Taikon became shocked when Yoan appeared in front of him again. What is it? Yoan showed him the scroll and spoke. Your Highness. Do you know what the scroll said? I don't know by every word, but yeah, mostly. The scroll of the Emperor wasn't something that even the royal family could open. But he had heard from the Emperor himself about the invitation already. Yoan then asked as he gave the invitation to Zhu Taikon, do you know who received these invitations? Zhu Taikon hesitated for a second and responded, since Yoan would know soon anyway. It was sent to all the leaders of each faction. The 3 factions? Yoan frowned. This meant that the palace will have leaders from all 3 factions on the same day. Gathering them in the same place at the same time? It was not something that could easily happen. Up until now, that had happened less than 5 times. Is the Blade God 6 Martial Clan trying to make the 3 factions go to war against each other? That seemed like a possible plan. But Zhu Taikon revealed some unexpected details instead. No. If you are talking about your cult, the Yulin clan of the Forces of Justice and the Alliance of the Forces of Evil, there is one more faction. One more? A new faction called the Blade God 6 Martial Clan.